Happy to see you all. Hare Krishna, Ram Vijay Prabhu, Dandavat Jeshta Prabhupada. So with your permission, we'll start today. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Pancha Kalpatarubhayascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Matsamo nasti papatma na paradhi cha kaschana parihare pilajjame kim bhruve purushottama dhumau skalitapadanam bhumireva avalambanam tvai jata paradhanam tvameva sharanam prabho adadana dantar idam yache punah punah Srimad Rupa Padam Bhojo Tulisyam Janma Janmani Brajoham Syam Bhave Bhave Radhe Vrindavanadhishe Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nija Padabja Tasyam Mayam Padiyatam Govinda Vallabhe Radhe Prathaye Tvamaham Sada Padiyam Niti Janathu Govindo Mam Taya Saha Radha Radhita Radhesha Radhika Prana Vallabha Radha Ramana Vande Tvam Radhika Prema Nirchita. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for joining the second part of the second chapter of the Bhakti Shastri class. I request actually Tejas. Tejas, I actually, who wants to read can just put in their names in the chat, and according to the order we receive, Tejas can call out when the next verse needs to be read. So that way it is easier. So I'll start with somebody, but in the meanwhile, whoever wants to read can put it in the chat, and then we can start from there. At least I can take first two. Okay, Pranagopika Mataji started and then Parth. So Tejas, you can keep track, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you. So Pranagopika Mataji can start off with the 31st chapter. But before we start, I just wanted to give a brief overview of how much we have done so far. In the second chapter, one of the first considerations was that when Arjuna decided he will not fight the battlefield, or he will not fight the battle, Krishna, first of all, he said he was a little surprised. He said, why? you know, he was expressing his surprise by saying, Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam anarya jushtam asyaryam akirtikaram Arjuna. He says, oh Arjuna, where have these impurities come upon? And um, but then Arjuna did not relent. He said, he still gave much more arguments on why he will not fight this battlefield. After 2 or 3 verses of resistance against Krishna's desire or the idea to fight the battlefield, Arjuna just gives up. He says, Karpanya dosho pahata swabhava puchhami tvam dharma sammudaha chetaha. And then he says, Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. With that verse, he says, oh Krishna, I surrender unto you. I am your disciple and instruct me. So immediately, Krishna, he takes up the charge of being the teacher, and he says to Arjuna, Ashocyan anvashocastvam prajnavadamscha bhashase gatashuna gatasumsaha nanashoshanti pandita. He says, oh Arjuna, while you are talking very big words, very learned words, but you are lamenting for what that is not worthy of lamentation. The wise neither lament for the living nor for the dead. And for the next 30 verses, he actually gets him into the analytical study of what the body is, what the soul is. And the conclusion he gives is that the body, no matter how hard you try, is not going to be sustainable or not going to be permanent, whereas the soul has absolutely no change and it is eternal. And then we discussed a little bit about the, the famous verse where we kind of refuted some Mayavadi ideas based on the instructions of Krishna. So today I think we are on the verse number 31. So we can start with that. So let's start with the verse 31. From verse 31 through 39, we should take notice the fact that Krishna is actually going to tell Arjuna, now the analytical study of the body and soul is completed. Now he's specifically talking to Arjuna in terms of his duty as a Kshatriya. So let's start with this particular verse. So Pranagopika Matji, are you ready?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Swadharmam api chaveksha
Swadharmamapi chaveksha
navikampitumarhasi
navikampitumarhasi
dharmadhiyuddhachreyonyat
dharmyadhiyuddhachreyonyat
kshatriyasya navidyate.
kshatriyasya navidyate.
Translation, please.
Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation.
Thank you. Next, Tejas. Who's next?
Parth, and then Ram Prasad Prabhu.
Perfect. Thank you. Yadrichaya chopapannam
Yadrichaya chopapanam
svargadvaramapavrutam
Svargadvaram apavritam
Sukhina kshatriya partha
Sukhina Kshatriya Partha
labante yuddhamidrisham.
Labhante Yudhamidrasham. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets.
Thank you. Here, one point, the word yadricha is a pretty interesting word in this verse. The Kshatriyas in the previous times would not fight needlessly or mindlessly. And when the word yadrichaya is used, which means the war would be somehow or other arranged or happen by will of God or by the will of destiny. The Kshatriyas would not mindlessly become savage thugs just to attack and loot the neighboring kingdom. That was not the goal. But having said that, because of the nature of politics and diplomacy, war becomes inevitable. And that's the reason Krishna is using the word yadrichaya, unsought. Kshatriyas don't go after trying to find a war, but when it comes, then you wouldn't resist. One of the charges leveled against Bhagavad Gita is that this book is a very violent book because of the simple fact that Arjuna wanted to have peace, and if he had his way, or if Krishna didn't quote unquote force him to fight the battle, then millions of soldiers would have been saved. And why is it that God is causing so much of bloodshed? First of all, the situation when it was evolving on where the Pandavas and the Kauravas were trying to um, come to an agreement, where the Pandavas thought that they had honored their 12 years and 1 year incognito conditions of the Kauravas, and Kauravas refused to give them the kingdom. So much of effort and time was spent for trying to get some peace or having a peace agreement. But eventually, it didn't work out, and then so the war was inevitable. Violence in of itself is not the first course of action, or neither the best course of action, but it is a necessary course of action when everything else fails. I'll give a simple example. If you go to a doctor with some ailment, the doctor first says, try some. Let's take, God forbid, I hope and pray that nobody gets COVID. But assume that somebody has a COVID-like symptoms. The initial first priority will be that they say that, no, COVID is not a good example. Let's take something more different, tumor, yeah. So if the tumor is really small and it can be cured with some medicines or diseases, medicines or tablets, sorry, then the doctor says, do this. But if it doesn't work, okay, we'll try the laser. If not, then we have to actually operate upon the patient and actually take the tumor out. So while the doctor, if you go to the doctor and really a person is suffering, and the situation is such that needs a surgery, and the doctor says, oh my God, if I cut you, so much of blood will flow out, and I can't take that. It's too much of violence. Violence is needed in that condition. In fact, violence is needed for a higher purpose. So violence in of itself is not the non-violence in of itself is not the right purpose of the world, or even in fact it is useless. Another example I'll give, and it may seem humorous. Your house is being robbed, not your, God forbid, somebody's house is being robbed, and the robbers came in and they beat up the residents of the house, and somehow or other the residents got hold of a phone and they called 911, and the police came rushing to the house, and they see that the residents are pretty badly beaten up, and the robbers are kind of looting the house and trying to run away. And the police say to the residents, oh, why are you making a big fuss? They are like, okay, some issues, let them rob. You're beaten, that's okay. It will happen. You should forgive and forget, non-violence. You will say, what's going on? The idea there is violence has its own place. And then by Krishna, when he says that, this world, he is the creator, maintainer, and the annihilator of this world. So it is his call where the violence is needed. And in this case, it was Krishna's call that the armies have really overburdened this earth. And Brahma actually came to him saying that Mother Earth is very much grieved that so many armies, so many kings are maintaining so many armies, and there needs to be some sort of course correction for this world, and that was Krishna's plan, and Krishna's plan is supreme and it cannot be thwarted. And just like COVID is Krishna's plan, I mean, nobody wants it. Nobody wants it. Yet we are, as we speak today, it's 1 million and 69,000 people completely dead worldwide. It's just the nature of this world, and we just um, have to accept what Krishna's plan is, though it might not be apparent. So let's just continue with that. So yadrichaya is important, which means we don't try for war, but war comes of its own accord. And the other point we have to make is the nature of world is such there will be wars. It will be inevitable. All right, next verse. अथ चेत्त्वमिमं धर्म्यम्
अथ चेत्त्वम् इमं धर्म्यं
सङ्ग्रामं न करिष्यसि
सङ्ग्रामं न करिष्यसि
ततः स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च
ततः स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च
हित्वा पापमवाप्स्यसि.
हित्वा पापम् अवाप्स्यसि. Translation: If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter.
Thank you. Next verse.
So next is Vamsidhari Damodar Prabhu and then Ishwari Radha Mataji.
Thank you. Akirtim chapi bhutani
अकीर्तिं चापि भूतानि
katayishyanti te vyayam
कथयिष्यन्ति ते व्ययाम्
sambhavitasya cha kirtir
सम्भावितस्य च कीर्तिर्
maranad atirichyate.
मरणादतिरिच्यते. Translation: People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death.
Mataji, so you can keep the Sanskrit and English translation in one screen. So you can scroll up a little bit for the text 35. Good. So that way it's, no, go up a little bit more. The text and the translation should be in one screen so that you don't have to scroll when they are reading. Perfect. This is good. The ironical thing, one of the things in this thing in the previous verses, Krishna says is, Arjuna, if you do not fight, then you will incur sin. And Arjuna's thinking in the first chapter was, if I fight, I will incur sin. You see the contradiction? Here he says, Krishna says, oh Arjuna, if you don't fight, you will incur sin. And then the oftentimes the question comes is something what I am thinking same as what God is thinking, or is my thinking inspired by God or by my own will? Here we can see how Arjuna's thinking was radically opposite. In the conditioned state, our thinking is different than what Krishna is thinking. And it is always better to approach a spiritual master or a spiritual guide with whom you can inquire and get the right answers. Otherwise, we will be doing diametrically opposite to to what is spiritual and material. Oftentimes people kind of get confused. What is spiritual and what is material, and how to go about it. So next verse. Bhayadranaduparatam
भयाद्रनाद् उपरतं
mamsyante tvam maharata
मंस्यन्ते त्वं महारथः
yesham chatvam bahumato
येषां च त्वं बहुमतो
bhutva yasyasi laghavam.
Bhutva yasya silagavam. Translation. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
Thank you, Ishwari Mataji. Next verse.
Next is Vaishnavi and then Anuradha Mataji.
Thank you. Avachyavadamscha bahun
Avachyavadamsha bahun
vadishyanti tavahitaha
vadishyanti tavahitaha
nindantastava samarthyam
nindantastava samartyam
tato dukkataram nukim.
tato dukkataram nukim. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you?
So, as I mentioned earlier, this is an extreme pain for Arjuna. If the enemies or if some opponents of Arjuna came up to him and scorn his abilities, that was really painful because of the simple fact that I mentioned a story earlier on in the first chapter where Arjuna had taken a vow saying that anybody who told him, Arjuna, you are a warrior not fit for this Gandiva weapon, then Arjuna had taken a vow to kill him. And we know the story of how, I don't want to repeat the story, but I'm just bringing you the story in the context that to these words for Arjuna, they would have been worse than death. Krishna said, look, you are saying you will not fight, and you will live by begging, but your enemies, you are thinking that you are being very compassionate upon the enemies, but your enemies will scorn your abilities as much as the earlier example that I mentioned, the residents being robbed and the police being very compassionate upon the robbers will be actually scorned. That sort of thinking will be actually derided and not taken very nicely by the people who are victims. In the same way, people will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and that's going to be really painful. It's going to be worse than death for you. So please don't do that. Next verse. I know we have questions. Keep them rolling, and then we will take it once we have completed some verses. Ato va prapsyasi swargam
Hato vyaprápsi sarvagram
jitva va bhokshase mahim
jitva bhokshasi mahiham
tasmad uttishta kaunteya
tasmat uttishta kaunteya
yuddhaya krita nischayah.
yuddha krita nischayah. Translation. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. So here Krishna is saying that in both the ways, one way or other, you will not be at loss. If you lose the kingdom or if you lose the battlefield, then you will attain heavenly planets and you will enjoy. Or if you actually win the battlefield, then you will stay back on the earth and you will enjoy your kingdom one way or other. So with determination, please fight. Next verse, please.
Next is Vasavi Mataji and then Sita Rani Mataji and then Ujjvala Rasa Mataji.
Sukha dukkhe same kritva
सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा
labha labho jaya jayo
लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ
tato yuddhaya yujyasva
ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व
naivam papam avapsyasi.
नैवं पापम् अवाप्यसि. Do you fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by so doing you shall never incur sin? Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Esha te vihita sankhye
एषा ते विहिता साङ्ख्ये
buddhir yoge tvimam shruno
बुद्धिर्योगे त्विमां शृणु
buddhya yukto yaya partha
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
karma bandham prahasyasi.
कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि. Translation. Thus far, thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive result. O son of Partha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So this is a pivoting point. So up till the verse 30th, Krishna described the nature of body and soul. From verses 31 through 39, Krishna specifically talked to Arjuna in terms of his own duty. And from 39 through the entire chapter, to the end of the chapter, Krishna talks about attaining that spiritual state um, by performing Nishkama Karma Yoga. So, why did Krishna say about performing these activities or being situated in Buddhi Yoga? There is an explanation here. It's an interesting explanation. Sometimes it can be a little confusing. So I'll just clear that up a little bit before we go ahead. By mere theoretical knowledge of soul, it is not enough to cross over the niches of material existence, because the idea is that even though I might come to the faint realization I am not the body, to be actually situated on the platform of soul requires much more of knowledge on part of the sadhaka or the practitioner on the path of spiritual life, because ultimately without knowing Krishna, it's impossible to know a complete self-realization. In fact, it is mentioned in one of the purports, self-realization means to know Krishna and our relationship to Krishna. It's not who I am. At this point, in fact, if you can see almost up till chapter 5, Krishna is just talking, he doesn't talk much about himself. In fact, in the 6th chapter also, he talks a little bit, but even he gives hints here and there. When we go on in the chapters, I'll tell hints where Krishna is inserting himself in the conversation, but barely he inserts himself into conversation. He is a supreme absolute truth, but look at the compassion for the conditioned soul. He doesn't talk about himself. He is the source of the creation. He is the source of the jiva. He is the cause by which the jiva is put into the material world, but he doesn't talk. He just talks about, oh jiva, you have to do like this. And then from 39 through the 72nd verse, Krishna talks about performing one's duty without attachment or the fruits for results. Because in the previous verse, he says, O Arjuna, fight without considering victory or defeat, loss or gain, pain or pleasure. And by doing so, you'll never incur sin. How can you actually do this? By not being attached to the fruits of work. Unfortunately, those who are on the path of work, they are grasping after the fruits. Anything that is really pleasurable or according to my expectation, that is anything pleasing, anything profitable, and anything praise or any material reputation, all those things that come as a part of my work, I like it, I'll take it. But anything that is contrary to that, then I'm disgusted by it, or my emotions are moved by it. And Krishna is saying, as long as you have emotions moving because of the results, then you are bound up by the reactions of work. And Krishna, the first step Krishna is saying is that one has to perform. In the last purport, when we do that, we'll refer to, but right now, in the next few verses, Krishna is talking of Bhakti Yoga. It will be very surprising that where is Bhakti Yoga? There is no knowledge of the Supreme at this point of time. We don't know who Krishna is. We don't know what his opulences are. We don't know what our relationship with is. So that is the reason Krishna does not give about Bhakti Yoga in a direct way. He doesn't here at the same Manmana Bhava Bhakto Madhyaji. He doesn't introduce that here because he hasn't introduced himself, who is the object of all the worship. So he gives hints of the devotional service, and the next few verses we'll see those hints, and then it is expanded later in the Bhakti Yoga section. So let's go on to the next few verses. So don't change the screen, Mataji, but in the previous verse, when Krishna talks of Buddhi Yoga, Srila Prabhupada translates that as, it is very confusing purport. If you take time to read it, there will be definitely some source of confusion, and we can discuss later, but I'll give the answer to that. Srila Prabhupada says Buddhi Yoga as either Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, and devotees are like, what is it? Which is it? Which is what? Is it Buddhi Yoga? Is it Karma Yoga? It is both. The reason being is that intelligence based on our path can either propel one on the path of Karma Yoga or give the rise to Buddhi Yoga. And the reason is, in the 10th chapter, Krishna, in the Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita, he says, Dadami Buddhi Yogam tam yenamam upayantite. And he talks of Buddhi Yoga, and that is specifically related to Bhakti Yoga. But in the next one or two verses, the Buddhi Yoga is referred, but that is referred to Karma Yoga. So it can mean both. So just to give you the context. And in the next few verses, Krishna has woven Bhakti Yoga into the verses without directly mentioning them. And so let's take up this verse. Next, whoever is to.
Nehavikramanashtosti
Pratyavayo na vidyate
pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamasya dharmasya
ayate mahato bhayat.
trayate mahato bhayat. Translation. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear.
Thank you. So here the question can be asked thank you. Here the question can be asked is, on this path, there is no loss or diminution, yes or yes? Isn't that the verse that says? What path is being referred to here? Now, if the path is referred to as being any other form of yoga, then how, if you can do a little bit, then I can be saved from greatest danger. The other process of yoga, they need to be completed or perfected to achieve the fruits of that. Otherwise, you will not get the fruits. Case in point, when we go to the 6th chapter, when Krishna tells Arjuna about the Dhyana Yoga, he says you should find a place which is neither too high nor too low. You should spread a kusha grass. You should stare at the tip of the nose. You should follow Brahma. So all those things are mentioned, yes or yes, right? Now, in that, as part of that, Arjuna asks Krishna, oh Krishna, you are asking me to control the mind. And to me, controlling the mind is greater than controlling the wind. And also, it seems to be that the chances of failure are pretty high on this path. And what happens to such a person who, because of some reason or other, he stops performing this yoga and he falls down. He is neither here nor there. Now, in that, Krishna says that he can, don't worry, oh Arjuna, he becomes again born in a Brahmana family or in the birth of a transcendentalist. But in this specific context, here it is being mentioned that this verse specifically is talking of Bhakti Yoga, where other paths also the loss is not there, but in Bhakti Yoga especially, even if one performs a little bit of advancement, then one it is yours to keep forever. What is our spiritual 401k is from this verse is mentioned. Now we have a 401k or a retirement account where once you retire, then what is it that you can depend upon? And this is the 401k verse where it is mentioned, even if one performs a little bit on this path, which is the Bhakti Yoga. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, he quotes the famous Tyakva swadharmam charanam bhujam hare bhajan apakota patet tato yadi Kvava Bhadram Abhut Amushyakim, Kovarta Apto Bhajatam Sodharmata. He quotes Narada Muni from the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, where he says, what's the loss even if one falls down from this path? Because whatever you got, that's yours to keep forever. So, my dear assembled Vaishnavas, so that will be your ROI, return on investment in Bhagavad Gita, is that you get to keep this knowledge and that will be yours forever to keep. All right, next verse, please. Vyavasayatmika buddhir.
Right, sorry, Prabhu. Right now is Ankita Mataji's turn, and it's Smita and Nitish.
Okay. All right, Ankita Mataji. Vyavasayatmika buddhir.
Vyavasatmika buddhir.
Ekeha kurunandana.
Ekeha kurunandana.
Bahushakahyanantascha.
Bahushakhyah antascha.
Buddhayo vyavasayinam.
Buddhayo vavashayinam. Translation: those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched.
So here, again, this is a hint of Bhakti Yoga, because when you say one-pointed resolution, it has to be on one fixed goal, and that goal is never changing. Otherwise, if the goal keeps changing, then my intelligence keeps changing, right? For example, if a mother who's cooking for the child, for her first child, and he or she tells him to do something, and she starts cooking, and the second child comes and says something, and third child, and the husband's child something, her intelligence becomes irresolute because there is no fixed goal on what needs to be cooked. Here, the idea is that if Krishna is defining of one goal, and that has to be him, because later in the chapters of Bhagavad Gita, he's mentioning that those who consider me the highest goal, they are most dear to me, and I am the highest goal, I am the refuge. So because Krishna is throwing hints in these verses about Bhakti Yoga, he doesn't mention directly. So that is the reason why second chapter is called a summary study of the entire Bhagavad Gita. In a very summary it is given, but in a hint form. All right, next verse. And who are those who are irresolute is mentioned in these two verses. All right. Yamimam pushpitam vacham.
Yamimam pushpitam vacham.
Pravadantya vipaschitaha.
Pravadantya vipaschitaha.
Vedavadarata partha.
Vedavadarata partha.
Nanyad asti tivadinaha.
Nanyad asti tivadinaha.
Kamatmana svargapara.
Kamatmana svargapara.
Janma karma falapradam.
Janma karma falapradam.
Kriya vishesha bahulam.
Kriya vishesha bahulam.
Bhogaishvarya gatim prati.
Bhogaishvarya gatim prati.
Very nice. Both are perfectly synchronized.
Thank you.
Translation: men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, result in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this.
So one of the things that you hear about Vedas, Vedas, on one hand, we respect them because they are the absolute truth. They are the Shruti Pramana, and they cannot be violated. They are emanating from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But here, Krishna is saying something not positive about the Vedas, because Vedas seem to kind of delude people, actually gives a misleading interpretation of what it is. And there are few people who actually are, are perfectly well versed in the Vedas and the rituals, and yet Krishna is not really happy with them here. So let me explain a little bit. Vedas have two sections, in a broad section, or three sections. Um, but the first section is called Karma Kanda section, a section where for those who want to continue their stay in the prison but want to upgrade to a better facilities, that is something for the Karma Kanda section, where one performs sacrifices and other sorts of appeasement of the demigods with rituals to get to the planets of demigods or progeny or whatever. And then the Jnana Kanda is more of knowledge, and the Upasana Kanda actually talks of worshipping the Supreme. But Vedas never give directly the information about Krishna. And thus, Vedas can mislead based on your own mentality or your own desire for sense gratification in the world. And that's the reason Krishna somewhat warns us that you shouldn't get tripped by the Karmakanda section in the Vedas and think that is. And he here seems to criticize those who actually, these Vedavadaratas, who think that the perfection of Vedas is to actually go to the higher planets. And there is nothing else. Vadanti astiti nanyana. So the verse is that they say beyond this there is nothing. Let's look it up. That particular, you don't need to do anything, Sirisha Mataji. Let me just do it here. Sorry, give me 1 minute. Nanyat astiti vadinaha. Na anyat means there is nothing else. There is astiti vadinaha. They say like that. This is the Vedic. And in fact, one of the famous examples that is given in Srimad Bhagavatam is the wife of the Yajnik Brahmanas, or the episode of the Yajnik Brahmanas, where Krishna and Balaram were maintaining or grazing their cows in the forest, and the cowboys became really hungry. And it so happened that they somehow or other, they didn't pack their lunches or whatever could be the reason. And Krishna said to the cowherd boys, please go and ask these Brahmanas who are nearby performing Vedic sacrifices for some food. They tell them that Krishna and Balaram have come and are asking for some food. And as we know the story of how the Brahmanas failed to recognize the how do you say, the most earth-shattering, the most ecstatic event that can happen possibly in their lives, because they didn't know. They had all the Vedic information, yet they failed to recognize who was the object of the Vedas, and that is Krishna. So here also it's mentioned the same thing. Next verse, please.
Next is Palika Mataji and then Nam Smaran Prabhu.
Thank you. Yes. Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam
भोगैश्वर्यप्रसक्तानां
taya pahrita chetasam
तया प्रहृतचेतसां
vyavasayatmika buddhi
व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिः
समाधौ न विधीयते.
समाधौ न विधीयते. Translation. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place.
Thank you. The idea here being that one has to limit one's sense enjoyment, because if one person is completely steeped day and night in sense enjoyment and nothing else, then it actually becomes an adverse or an obstacle on the path of spiritual realization, because the mind is too attached to kind of take hold of the Supreme. And one example I can give from my personal thing, all you sadhus must be really doing well, but the miserable person that I am, sometimes you are chanting your rounds and then you are really like trying your best, because when you chant the names of Krishna, Krishna is personally present. And once or twice it happened that the phone just emitted a beep, a ting or whatever, and then suddenly I looked up and I just I rushed to the phone to see what was going on. I shouldn't have done that. So you can see how the mind is such that, if it is not fixed in Krishna, it can get very easily sidetracked. And we can discuss further as how Krishna talks about the very intricate dynamic process on which how this thing happens. Next verse. Traigunya Vishaya Veda.
Traigunya Vishaya Veda.
Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna.
Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna.
Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto.
Nirdvando Nitya Sattvasto.
Niryoga Kshema Atmavan.
Niryoga Kshema Atmavan.
The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self.
Thank you so much, Bhumika Mata. So this particular thing, it seems Krishna is saying, really? On one hand, he says, Daivi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante maya metam. Krishna is saying that, O Arjuna, this material energy of mine is impossible to overcome. It is difficult. He uses the word very difficult to overcome. But if it is very difficult according to Krishna, then it's impossible for us. We can never overcome this. And here, Krishna is casually saying, Arjuna, just rise above the three modes of material nature. So we can see here, and then if we link up to this verse in the 14th chapter, 25th verse, don't need to project on the screen, where Krishna says, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhoyaya kalpate. He says, Mam chayo avyabhicharena, those who perform unalloyed devotional unto me, bhakti yogena, through bhakti prasakti, sagunan samatitya, they are automatically beyond the modes of material nature. So here Krishna, in the second chapter, he is not giving much of easy, effective way to overcome the modes of material nature. But he's giving the order here saying that you better be situated above. When you are in the modes of material nature, then it's not the best. So rise above him. He's giving that benchmark, and later he will tell how, because that is in the 14th chapter. Krishna talks extensively about the modes of material nature. He talks about what is mode of goodness, and then Arjuna's first question was, or rather one of the questions is, how do you rise above the modes of material nature? And then Krishna brings up this verse that I mentioned so far. So Okay, let's go a little bit few more verses, and then we can take, maybe at 54 we'll stop and take some few questions.
So next is Santosh Prabhu, and then Mrigakshi Vishnu Priya Mataji.
Thank you. Yavanartha udapane
Yavan artha udapane
sarvata samplutodake
sarvata samplutodake
tavan sarveshu vedeshu
tavan sarveshu vedeshu
brahmanasya vijanatah.
brahmanasya vijanataha. Translation: all purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them.
So here, Vedas are compared to the small well, and the purpose or the knowledge behind the purpose of the Vedas is compared like a broad ocean, which means that if perchance you can, and Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, Veda is just surveyor ahameva vidyo. This is the Purushottam month. We are doing the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and 15:15, where Krishna says about the famous verse Sarvasya Chaham. He says, Veda is just surveyor ahameva vidyo. Vedanta krit Veda videva chaham. That if you are studying the Vedas and you come to the conclusion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you have known the purpose of the Vedas. And if you haven't, then you have missed the goal of your Vedic studies. Similarly, if one can somehow or other understand Krishna, then one surpasses the Vedic wisdom or the Vedic studies. So that is a purpose, or that's the intent of the words that Krishna is speaking here. So next one, please. There's the famous verse. The famous verse which is used, abused, and which is manipulated in any case. Karmanyevadhikaraste
कर्मण्येऽधिकारस्ते
ma phaleshu kadachana
महाफलेषु कदाचन
ma karma phala heturbhur
मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुर्
ma te sangostva karmani.
मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वकर्मणि. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the result of your activities and never be attached to not doing your duties.
So thank you. When I talked about in the 39th verse where Krishna says about Buddhi Yoga, and then we had few of the Bhakti Yoga verses sprinkled in there. After doing that, now Krishna is pivoting back to the main topic or the topic at hand, which is the Nishkam Karma Yoga. I will discuss briefly the yoga ladder here to give you a picture of what the yoga ladder is, so that we get a fair idea. But we won't spend too much time. Probably in the 6th chapter, we can spend a little more time. Most of the life that we see that's going on in this world is beyond the Vedic realm. People are just living in a very unrestricted, unbridled, and uncontrolled existences. Their primary purpose is ahara nidra bhayamaituna. As the Itopadesha says, ahara nidra bhayamaitunancha samanya metat pashuvi narana dharmo hi adhiko visheshata dharma hina pashuvi samanam. Incidentally, Chanakya Pandit shlokas also has the exact same verse, but except instead of dharma, it is jnana. So, ahara nidra bhayamaitunancha samanya metat pashuvi naranam jnanam hi adhiko visheshaha jnana hina pashuvi samanam. That's mentioned. In either cases, the population of the world is engaged in those activities. Not there is not much difference, and that's the reason why we come up with these bizarre ideas. Man is a social animal. Sorry, no. The human form of life is so rare and precious. Bhagavatam like exhorts it exhorts, it fervently appeals that he says, Labdhva sudurlabhamidam bahusam bhavante Manushyam arthadam anityam api hadira. Purnam yateta napateda nurutyo yavat nishreyasaya vishaya sarva khalus sarvatra khalu, something, last line I forget. He says, Labdhva sudurlabham idam bahusam bhavante. Labdhva means to gain. Sudurlabham means very rarely gained. Bahu sambhava ante, after many, many births. What is that? Manushyam, or the human form of life. Arthadam is gives the highest benefit. And in any case, it's a beautiful verse in Bhagavatam. I don't want to get digressed, but if you want to look it up, it's 11:2:29 or 11:20:29. But after animalistic life, the next life is that, okay, there is a God, there is some religion, there are some rituals. As a human being, oh my God, it looks like I have some obligations here. I'm just not an animal. Okay, what are the obligations? There are certain obligations in the human form of life. Like we see that animals, they don't need marriage, but human beings, everything has like, having that kind of structure around. That is, and you take up to some form of, for us, Vedic perspective, but for Christians or Muslims, they take to some form of organized religion with the hope that they preserve their assets and they get more of what they desire. I have a lot of desires, and maybe the religion is the way to go. And I perform the Vedic rituals. It's called Sakam Karma Yoga, which means I perform the Vedic rituals with a view to get something. And the second aspect of the Karma Yoga is called Nishkam Karma Yoga, which is what we are discussing in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about this famous verse, Karmanyavadikaraste, where he says, this is the Nishkam Karma Yoga, where you perform your duties without aspiring for results. And then the next step of karma is Jnana Yoga, which we discuss in the 4th chapter. In the 5th chapter, we discuss Karma Sannyas, which means that we give up the work. And in the 6th chapter, we discuss Dhyana Yoga. This is the yoga ladder. And then beyond Dhyana Yoga is, from 7th onwards, is Bhakti Yoga. So that is the thing, or the yoga ladder. And then we are here in the Nishkam Karma Yoga section. So we'll do a few more verses and we'll take some questions.
So next is Swapna Mataji and then Ramesh Prabhu.
Thank you. Yogastha kuru karmani.
Yogastha kuru karmani.
Sangam tyaktva dhananjaya.
Sangam tyaktva dhananjaya.
Siddhya siddhyau samo bhutva.
Siddhi siddhyo samo bhutva.
Samatvam yoga uchyate.
Samatvam yoga uchyate. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga.
Dear devotees, please don't fall for the word yoga. Here, the definition of yoga as given by Krishna is there in this verse. Samatvam yoga uchyate means that is the definition of yoga. Don't fall for any other interpretation or meaning of yoga. There is a lot of yoga studios. There are a lot of, the word yoga is very popular. And then there is a yoga magazine, and there is a lot of merchandise based on yoga, yoga dresses, yoga mats, yoga, whatever yogas that is there. But this is the actual definition of yoga. So, so samatvam yoga uchyate, that one performs one duty in equanimity. Next verse, please. Durena hyavaram karma.
Durena hi avaram karma.
Buddhi yoga dhananjaya.
Buddhi Yoga Dhananjaya.
Buddhau Sharanamandvicha
Buddho Sharvam Anvicha.
Kripana Falahetavaha.
Kripana Falahetavaha. Translation: O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are miseries. Yeah.
And yes, they are misers indeed.
Nice.
Um, so the word Buddhi Yoga is used in this particular verse, but here the Buddhi Yoga actually refers to Karma Yoga. It is not referring to Bhakti Yoga. So that is the reason why the Srila Prabhupada, he is being the genius he is, he translates Buddhi Yoga in the previous verse, in the 39th verse, as both Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. It's both. So the next verse, please.
Next is Dayakar Prabhu and then Avanish.
Thank you. Welcome, Dayakar.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Buddhi yukto jahatiha.
Buddhi yukto jahatiha.
Ube sukruta dushkrute.
Ube sukruta duskrute.
Tasmad yogaya yujyasva.
Tasmad yogaya yujyasva.
Yoga karma kaushalam.
Yoga karma kausalam. Purport. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions, even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work.
Thank you. And please understand that in this material world, every action has a reaction. And since time immemorial, I have been in this world. And God only knows, literally, how much is my reactions that I have to carry with me. And it is mentioned in Mahabharata. There is a fascinating, beautiful analogy. It is mentioned, suppose there are thousands or 10,000s of cows, and those cows are along with their calves, and for some reason or other a calf is unable to see its mother, and it has this uncanny ability to find its mother amongst the thousands of cows that are there in the whole herd. And exactly the calf will go searching for its mother and it will exactly reach its mother. The reason Mahabharata brings up this analogy is that you may have this this vague doubt, karma, yeah, I might have done it, but who knows whether I'll get or not. Mahabharata says exactly as the calf is able to find the cow, the karma will exactly come to the person according to his or her destiny, and it's not going to change. It's perfect. This is by performing Nishkam Karma Yoga, one is able to burn the reactions. But if you want a very faster way to burn one's good or bad reactions, please stay tuned. We'll get to that. Next verse, please. Tejas, the speaker is ready, right?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Perfect. Thank you. Karmajam buddhi yukta hi.
Karmajam buddhi yukta hi.
Phalam tyaktva manishinaha.
Palam tyaktva manishinaha.
Janma bandha vinirmukta.
Janma bandha vinirmukta.
Padam gacchantyanāmayam.
Padam gacchantyanāmayam. Translation.
By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries by going back to Godhead.
Thank you, Avnish. So there is, I don't think we'll have COVID there to worry about. Text 52. Yada te moha kalilam.
Wait, next is Upasana Mataji and then Shilpa Mataji.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Pranam.
Dandavat pranam. Yada te moha kalilam.
Yada te mohi kalilam
Buddhir vyatitarishyati.
buddhir vyatitirishati
Tada gantasi nirvedam.
tada gantasi nirvedam
Shrotavyasya shrutasya cha.
shrotavasya shrutasya cha. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard.
Thank you. That's 53. Shruti vipratipannate.
Shilpa Mataji, your turn, please. Okay, I'll read Prabhu. Can you please?
Okay. Shruti vipratipannate.
Shruti vipratipannate
Yada stasyasi nischala.
yada satyas nischala
Samadhav achala buddhis.
samadau achala buddhis
Tada yogam avapsyasi.
tada yogam avapsyasi. Translation: when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Thank you.
So, thank you. Here, Krishna is mentioning that what is the result of performing Nishkam Karma Yoga is one is situated on the platform of self-realization, or knowing that I'm not this body, or to go beyond the bodily conception of life. This is the soul and this is the body. And when one performs Nishkam Karma Yoga, one rises above the body. And so the next verses, Arjuna is going to ask about the state of a person or the characteristics of a person who's attained such consciousness. But we will pause here and then we can take few questions. So thank you. This has been really useful. So we can have a break and then we can talk about or take few questions. What questions do we have? There are some questions in Slack channel, I guess.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
So Nishkama Karma Yoga means like doing your duties without expecting the result, right Prabhuji?
Correct.
But how to practice that, Prabhuji? Because whatever we do, we think of the result. So is there any trick or something for that? How to practice it?
So strictly speaking, we are not, for devotees, the best way to perform Nishkam Karma Yoga is to perform one's devotional service, like hearing and chanting and worshipping Krishna, with no expectation of result, or to think that I'm worshipping Krishna, then I need something back. Or even think about it, attachment to the result causes a lot of anxiety. And for the students, especially, if you can see, they take the exam hoping for a certain outcome of that exam, in terms of either the grades or in terms of their efforts or their careers and so on and so forth. But when you are obsessed with the end result, then more often than not, you see that you don't pay attention to the effort that's there at hand, right? If you see that. And oftentimes the intelligence is really clouded, and your efforts are muddied by kind of that kind of thinking. So if I can have a plan and I can really execute on it, and if I don't worry about the results, then even on a practical level also, it's uh, it's something that is very relieving and very empowering. And the beauty or the irony is, even those who are not devotees, for example, Stephen Covey in his famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says there is a circle of concern and then there is the circle of influence. For example, we have the presidential elections that are going to happen next month. There is a circle of concern about, which candidate will come and then what's going on. There is that circle of concern that is there, but your circle of influence is pretty much limited to your voting, yes or yes. If I lock in myself emotionally on a particular outcome, then I am setting up myself for failure if the outcome doesn't happen, or I am moved with joy for some time when that outcome happens. Krishna is saying, be steady in both. It's not, you are not the reason. The how we can understand is, you are not the controller of your fruits or the outcome of the efforts. I actually am controlling that. I am the one who will give you your results of your work. So if you don't have that faith, then you are setting it for you are setting up yourself for anxiety. So is that helpful, Mataji? These are some of the practical aspects and also the spiritual aspect, where we do the best and we say to Krishna, yeah. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam.
Yeah, before we go for more questions, sorry, Niti, how is this higher cause? There are a few things in the chat, so should we take that later? Then okay, we'll take that later. Yes, go ahead, Prabhuji. Let's take some questions and then we'll go to the chat. Or those who posted on chat can also ask in this, so that will be much easier. So they can also give the context. Yes, go ahead, Prabhu.
Dhanavad Pranam, Prabhu. Now, to Mataji's question, I just have my 2 cents of observation, if I may.
Sure.
So it's just like, we hear in many interviews of Olympians and sports people like stars that they are asked before the match that, are you winning gold or are you winning this NFL Super Bowl championship? And their response is, I do my job, I do my journey, I take care of the journey, and that's it, right? So basically focus on the work at hand. Like you said, it's indirectly they're actually worshiping what Krishna is saying, that not worried about the result, just do the best during that time, right? So.
Yes, thank you for nicely put.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanavad Pranam. Prabhuji, I had a question related to same what Mataji had asked. Right. So if we were to define following, how would we define Karma Kanda, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, and then Nishkama Karma Yoga? Because I feel like when I read Bhagavad Gita, I feel sometimes they are used in kind of yeah. So if we are talking to someone who has no idea, sometimes it's confusing to ourselves that how do you define in 2 lines each of them.
So I liked Hanumat Preshak Maharaj's example. Karma Yoga means I will do what I want to do and will offer it to Krishna. And then Bhakti Yoga means I'll do what Krishna wants to do. So in a nutshell, but then there are many subtle things. One last point. So Mataji, my request to you is based on how easily they can grasp the subtlety. To that extent, you put it like this. Karma Yoga means do what you do. And you may be not a devotee, you may not be chanting, you may not be hearing Bhagavatam, you may not even have a conception of God, but you do whatever and offer it to God. And for Bhakti Yoga means you find out what Krishna wants and you do that.
So Prabhuji, then Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga, no, sorry. Buddhi Yoga and Jnana Yoga, are those two same?
So, nice point. Buddhi Yoga means the intelligence. Krishna is saying, based on what path you choose, I will strengthen your intelligence according to that path. For example, if I have to do karma yoga, I need some intelligence to analyze to whom I need to offer, why I need to offer, when I need to offer, and what is the dharma. And all those intelligence, Krishna is saying, I'll strengthen it. If you want to take the path of karma, I'll strengthen your buddhi like that. But if you want to go to bhakti yoga, then dadami, I will give you that dadami buddhi yoga. Okay. So buddhi yoga is more of one example you can say is a cement that can be used to build whatever structure you want. That is the one that is going to hold it. That's the one to reinforce it. So
Okay,
is that
that's
okay?
beautiful. Yes, Prabhuji. And then last, sorry.
No problems. It's this
What,
question and answers.
and
Yes.
then what is the difference between Buddhi Yoga? Oh, so in Jnana Yoga, Krishna is saying that, or we are saying that I will do what Krishna wants me to do.
That is in karma yoga, but in the jnana yoga, then we go beyond the karma itself, the activities, the material nature, the actions, reactions, all the three modes. We try to go beyond by analyzing the material nature, saying that this material nature is full of miseries. Let me rise above that through jnana or through realized knowledge. What that comes from karma yoga.
Okay, so then when you said I will do what I want to do and offer it to God, was that karma kanda? Sorry, I'm getting confused.
What is that? Was karma yoga. Karma kanda means I will use God for my purpose. God has given me Vedas. I don't even want to offer it to God. I'm specifically doing this because Vedas said, do this, you will go to heavenly planet, and I have faith in Vedas, I will do it.
Okay.
I'm going to karma kanda means I'm going to upgrade my prison cell from having a public bathroom and no AC, I'll have a private bathroom and AC. That is, and good food. That is my karma kanda.
Okay.
And karma yoga is, okay, there is a jailer, maybe I should do something nice for him so that, eventually I'll be happy in the prison, but eventually I'll get out of it. And then the jailer will give me jnana saying that, Baba, don't stay in the prison. There is something life outside the prison. Outside the life in the prison is, I'm still a homeless person. Means every world is my world and the Brahman is mine. Jnana yoga means I come to the conclusion that God is Brahman.
Okay.
And Dhyana yoga is, then I will see, oh, God is not spread everywhere and is the source of creation, but he's also living in everybody as Paramatma. And Dhyana yoga, I get that realization. And then in Bhakti yoga, oh, no, he's not just the Paramatma, but he's the supreme absolute truth, Bhagwan, who is holding the flute in two hands. So in Krishna consciousness, because we have been given directly Bhakti yoga, we get confused with, and we have not been given the lower things. We didn't go through it. So oftentimes we kind of get, oh, it seems to be easy chanting Hare Krishna and going God. That seems to be a little, you get the idea, right?
Sometimes I feel it's like interchangeable the way. So it's thank you so much, Prabhuji. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Lalita Madhvi, I'm glad to serve you and your good husband. So,
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Nanda Pranam. Serious time obeisance. Prabhuji, in the definition of in the follow of that, just to check whether my understanding is correct. Now, what will be the difference between sakama karma yoga and nishkama karma yoga? So, by the definition of Hanuman Presh Swami, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. So can I say that sakama karma yoga is I will do what I want to do. I am still attached to the result, but then I will offer results to Krishna. And in the nishkam karma yoga, I will do what I want to do, but I'm not attached to the results, and I will offer results to Krishna still. So is that the correct understanding of it?
Slightly different. Sakam karma yoga is I will do what I want to do. I am really wanting to get this, and I'll get the results from Krishna, not I give the results to Krishna.
Oh, okay, I see.
And that is not Krishna. That is like the Vedas say, and then there is some God. There is some even God is also a little above picture, but demigods. So they will give me results. So, and then at least in Nishkam Karma Yoga, what I'm saying is I am detached from the fruits. And part of that, the next step is, if I'm detached from the fruits, might offer it, because I realize that there is the reactions. Then how to become free from the reactions? In the third chapter, Krishna says, Yajnartha karmano netra lokoyam karma bandhana. So in the Nishkam Karma Yoga will progress gradually towards the path where I give more and more of my results to Krishna, rather than just being detached from the results.
Prabhu, and I had one more question, Prabhu. In 39th, for example, right? And if we go with the flow, somehow flow doesn't match. It's like 39, it talks about Buddhi Yoga, but then as you pointed out in 40, we say in this endeavor. In this endeavor, but then here it refers to Bhakti Yoga instead of Buddhi Yoga.
Yeah.
And in 39 purport, Srila Prabhupada first mentions it as Karma Yoga, and then at the end he says actually Buddhi Yoga is devotional service. And same happens in 49th, where Prabhupada says that, oh, this is devotional service. And even in the translation he says devotional service. So actually it happens in probably in 50 also. So at many places, Buddhi Yoga is an alias of Bhakti Yoga. So, but then, in 49 again it's karma is Nishkama Karma Yoga, but then 50 it is Buddhi Yoga. So it's kind of how do you track it actually? Flow is really convoluted.
So here is the simple thing. For the first few verses, after the introduction of the 39th verse, Krishna is talking about Bhakti Yoga, but in a very, very covered way. He's giving just clues and hints. That's the reason why there is a little bit of confusion. When he says Traigunya Vishya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna, he talks first about like Vedavada Rathas and how their whole aspirations are for heavenly planets, which means, and then he says Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. It's like, how can we do this? If you're talking about a bunch of people who are interested in going to heavenly planets, and suddenly he's saying you are rise above. Krishna is actually hinting Bhakti Yoga. So that's the reason why he used Buddhi Yoga here as something that can be used for both. For example, Buddhi Yoga is like salt. If you want to make two preparations, salt is used for both the preparations, and it's needed for both the preparations. So for the Karma Yoga also, there is Buddhi Yoga, because Krishna is saying in the verse, Gyurena Hyavaram Karma. For that particular verse, he's saying Buddhi Yoga is referring to karma, whereas in the 10th chapter, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Really, I waited till 10th chapter and then Krishna is about to give me Buddhi Yoga, and what was I doing all the other chapters? Well, that is Bhakti Yoga regarding Buddhi. So that's where the confusion comes. We can Ananda Kishore Prabhu, you pulled this out of me, out of my mouth, because I was planning to go very deep into this, but I realized that this might be out of scope, and it will just derail our schedule. That is something which it's not a happy situation for anybody. So we can take it offline and we can discuss more, but you get the clue, right? Where, as I told Mataji, it is the cement that reinforces the structure that you are trying to put.
Okay. And I think I also like the point. It is Bhakti in the covered form.
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you, Rohit.
The reason why it's and there is a reason why. Well, oh my God, why did Krishna give like this? Well, any conversation, first you introduce the subject and then you introduce the predicate. Yes or yes?
Sambandha.
Nobody knows about Ananda Kishore Prabhu. And then I say, he's such a sincere, wonderful devotee. Who are you talking about? I'm talking about Ananda Kishore Prabhu. Well, you have to first introduce Ananda Kishore Prabhu, then you have to give the qualifications of Ananda Kishore Prabhu. Yes or yes? If I give the qualifications of Bhakti Yoga, which means Bhakti is towards Krishna, towards the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna has not even mentioned anything about himself. So to bring forth Bhakti at this point of time is to bring predicate without bringing the subject. And the subject here is the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna. So you see why Krishna doesn't openly tell about Bhakti Yoga right in the second chapter, and how he builds up the yoga process, leading up to the very famous verse. I think this This another verse that actually helps us to meditate is Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma. Ananda Kishore Prabhu.
न सोचति न कांक्षति समा सर्वेषु तेषु मद्भक्तिं लभते param.
When is bhakti coming in that verse?
Oh, at the end.
So, I mean, aren't we all supposed to do bhakti yoga? But did we actually? Are you on Brahma Bhuta platform, Ananda Kishore Prabhu? I'm not.
No, Prabhu.
Na shoshati na kankshi. You have no desires and no lamentation.
So without na, Prabhu.
Me too. That makes two of us. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu. Are you seeing everybody on the equal platform?
You can apply na here.
Good one. Then what happens after that? Samas sarveshu bhuteshu. Then you get what? Then you get Samas sarveshu bhuteshu.
Mad bhaktim labate param. So it is topmost.
Then you get it. The thing is, we haven't undergone through the devotees. The struggle of the devotees lies in the mercy of Mahaprabhu that we got all these without going through the previous processes. So there is the struggle that we have been given the highest, but it's like the kindergartner has been given entrance into Stanford PhD without going through any of the pre-quals. Now there is a little bit of struggle. So yeah. So Krishna builds up the whole Bhagavad Gita based on that verse. First he goes to Jnana, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, Jnana Yoga platform, and then Samas Sarvesh Bhuteshu, Jnana Yoga, then Mad Bhaktim Lavate. Then you see now how Bhagavad Gita is building up that philosophy around that verse. And so that's where, these verses are little covered. Is that okay, Anand Kishore Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Prabhuji. We have some questions on chat, so we'll go in order, Prabhu.
Okay.
So Nitish Bhatt Prabhu, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So my question was again in the initial part you were mentioning about the how violence is Bhagavad Gita does not actually talk about does not actually glorify violence, rather violence is necessary sometimes for a higher cause.
Mm-hmm.
So my question was that how this higher cause is determined, as in if someone we are discussing with comes up with this point that in this world everywhere there is violence going on with the mention of a higher cause. Everyone has their own relative higher cause.
I see.
Yeah. So what is absolute? How do we determine that if that question comes?
That is a very, very nice question. And thank you so much for asking, because I see your point. There are a few members of a particular group who randomly inflict violence. And we have seen so many times that happened. 9/11 comes to mind. And it's all in the name of higher cause. And that is the reason Krishna uses the word yadrichaya, which means you are not going to go inflict violence in the world. Violence will happen. And then you are then you realize it's from a higher purpose. For example, I give a simple example. Let's take the corporate world. I assume that you work in an office or some work for some company, right?
Yes, President.
Okay. If there is a particular employee that is causing too much of problems, either in terms of the incompetence or attitude, or do they immediately fire that person? No, they kind of, hey, first talk to him, looks like our expectations are not meeting, what's going on? And then if there is no reform, then that particular person is put on some sort of plan to improve their performance, and failing which, then that person has to be let go because for some reason or other. So the violence was not an immediate thing. The problem comes is immediate violence means that I have anger which is uncontrolled. I have habits that can lead or provoke to anger. I can have issues with myself, and that anger is not recommended in Bhagavad Gita. And that is something you are responsible for. The example I give often, please forgive me if people are tired of this example, but in the war, if a soldier fights with all discipline and kills enemies or enemy soldiers, he gets a medal or she gets a medal. But the same person, when wantonly picks up a fight when he's off duty at a restaurant or something like that and kills a person, he's tried for murder. It's the exact same act, but there is a cause behind it. So to use violence. Srila Prabhupada actually writes in the purport that because we know the difference between the body and soul, does not encourage the killing of unnecessarily or with no cause. So one should be really careful. If a person or a president of a country sends his army for now, and that army kills the people in another country, and there was no justification for that, the president of that country is responsible for the killing of all those thousands of people, and then he has to pay reactions. Did you know that? It's a very serious thing, and without another example, without getting sufficient training as a surgeon, nobody dares to operate on another person, and that's just violent, cruel. It's unheard of. In the same way, without knowing this shastric knowledge, to mindlessly use violence, that is just not acceptable. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So the next question is from Akshay Trivedi. Please ask your question.
Hi Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhu, I was thinking in terms of the verse 33, where Krishna says that Arjuna incurs sin for neglecting his duties. I was thinking if it applies to us or if it can apply to us in any way, because because first of all, what are our duties and whether we incur sins by not performing them?
So I'll give the short answer because the long answer can take a while and can be might not be very practical. In this case, it was obviously Arjuna was a Kshatriya, and to not fight would cause sinful reactions because he was not performing his duty. But in the modern context, because the Varnashrama system is completely muddled, completely obfuscated, and with no clear distinction on, who am I? And practically everyone is in a position of a Shudra, including me, because I'm working for someone else. Our main duties in this age will be in the form of Bhakti Yoga. And so the focus right now, instead of having it on Varnashrama, would be to say, how can I improve my sadhana? Because I've been given the path of Bhakti Yoga by some miraculous good fortune. Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavanji. I have been given this opportunity to hear and chant about Krishna and reap the highest benefits of spiritual life. In the sadhana stage, you can almost take it as karma yoga or take it as your prescribed duty. Because Srila Prabhupada also wrote prescribed number of rounds every day, which means it's our prescribed duty. And we can use that as a benchmark, and we should do it without fail. From the spiritual perspective. From the material perspective, of course, there are the normal duties. You be responsible citizen, pay your taxes, take care of your family. You have to don't be neglectful of trying to earn some money. On a darker side, one of the things that people can do well in this age, especially the younger people, is that if you marry, please don't divorce, because divorce is again similar to Arjuna not fighting. It can incur tremendous amount of reactions. In fact, Garuda Puran does mention that a man who abandons a young wife, and there are some reactions. Of course, in the modern context, I don't want to get too much into it because it's just not the say of one person, the male in this case. Even the female gender also has some has to participate in that. But in any case, so those are the few things. Is that okay, Akshayji? I think nothing fanciful, nothing like we need to take up a plow or a tractor and buy it and start tilling the fields. Otherwise, we won't do our dharma. It's not like that. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And the other one last point on that is, based on my psychophysical nature, I would like to do certain things, and you should do the best you can to that. And each of us has our own psychophysical nature, though very clear. For example, when I say clear, means one person who's born as a businessman, Vaishya, very clear. Ask them to read books, useless. Ask them to, become a kshatriya and join like armed force. No way. I know this is what I know. I know how to make money. So then just do your thing. So you do have some aspects, some inkling. Most of the times it's muddied, but just keep focus on bhakti yoga. That's the best thing. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just do a few more verses and then take more questions, because otherwise we will not complete the chapter. So just let's go back to thank you. And this time, Tejas, we are not going to stop till we reach the verse number 72. So, so you can start, calling the devotees.
Okay. Then so we finished off with Shilpa Mataji. So now it's Mukta Mataji and then Shyamu Karuna Mataji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, Mukta Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam.
Dandat Pranam. Hope all your family members are doing well, and I'll pray for them.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhu, they are doing well now.
Wonderful. Arjuna Uvacha.
Arjuna Uvacha.
Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha.
Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasha.
Samadhistasya Keshava.
Samadhistasya Keshava.
Sthitadhi kim prabhasheta.
Sthitidhi kim prabhasheta.
Kimasita vrajeta kim.
Kim ashita vrajeta kim. Translation. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk?
Thank you. Next verse. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Prajahati yada kaman.
Prajahati yada kaman.
Sarvan partha manogatan.
Sarvan partha manogatan.
Atmanyevatmana tushtaha.
Atmanyevatmana tushtaha.
Sthita prajnastadochyate.
Sthita prajnastadochyate. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concussion, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Tejas.
Yes, Prabhu. So now is Nitya Tarangini Mataji, and then after that is Rasamrita Shesh, Prabhu.
Thank you. Dukkeshvanudvignamana.
Dukkeshvanudvignamana.
Sukeshu vigataspruhaha.
Sukheshu vigataspruhaha.
Vitaraga bhayakrodhaha.
Vitaraga bhayakrodhaha.
Stitidhirmuniruchyate.
Itidhirmaniruchyate. One who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger is called a sage of steady mind.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yaha sarvatra nabhi, sorry, Yaha sarvatra, sorry, Yaha sarvatran abhisnehas.
Yah sarvatra nabhisnehas
Tattat prapya shubhashubham.
tattat prapya subhasubham
Nabhinandati nadveshti.
nabhinandati nadveshti
Tasya prajna pratishtita.
tasya prajna pratishtitata. Translation. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor dispraising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge.
Thank you.
So next is Nikunja Sundari Mataji, and then is Shanti Mataji, and then Aname.
Perfect. Hare Krishna, Nikunja Sundari Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yada samharate chayam.
Yada samharate chayam.
Kurmongani vasarvashaha.
Kurmondani vasarvasa.
Indriyanindriyartebhyas.
Indriyanindriyartebhyas.
Tasya prajna pratishtita.
Tasya prajna pratishtita. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Vishaya vinivartante.
Vishaya vinivartante.
Niraharasya dehinaha.
Niraharasya dehinaha.
Rasavarjam rasopyasya.
Rasavarjam rasopyasya.
Param drashtva nivartate.
Param društva nivartate. Translation. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Thank you.
So this is a particularly important verse, or rather an inspiring verse for us, because mind control, sense control, while it was much relatively easier in the previous ages with the advent of smartphones and so much of distraction that's going on in this world and so much of stress and anxiety, it can be challenging. And therefore, Krishna is emphasizing here at the very outset that the process of Bhakti Yoga is such that we can meditate upon Krishna and his transcendental feature, and the mind becomes pacified when you chant his name. When you hear about his wonderful pastimes, there is such satiation of the soul, there is such satisfaction. And when we somehow or other struggle to, initially there is a struggle in the stage of sadhana. When we struggle, it becomes increasingly tasteful. And then we can see that the lower forms of enjoyment, they don't seem to be that great. In fact, I have practically seen quite few devotees who many years ago, I've seen this observed, when they joined ISKCON and when they started chanting a little bit, not like a full-fledged thing, and they started coming to temple, they started writing the arti, they started hearing to some bhajans, and they found the process so satisfying that the mundane songs, it's not immediately they gave up the mundane movie songs or whatever, pop, rock, Indian classical, whatever, not classical, but at least Indian music, so on and so forth. The taste was not there to hear as much, though there was like a lingering taste, but it didn't seem the same intensity with which they heard prior. it was not there, which just shows the power of devotional service, how it can attract the mind, it can satisfy. And how many times, I'm sure many of the members here experience that some people who are completely unfamiliar with devotional service, they must have tasted the prasadam and they must have said, wow, there is something really special in this. There is something different here. And that sort of taste is what Krishna is emphasizing. And we'll continue more. Who's next?
It should be Aname.
Okay. Haribol Aname. Yatato hyapi kaunteya
Yatatopi kaunteya
purushasya vipaschitaha
purushasya vipaschita
indriyani pramathini
indriyani pramathini
haranti prasabham manaha.
haranti prasabham manaha. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind of even a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them.
Thank you. And Krishna himself is saying, after telling that control the mind and senses, he's saying it's difficult to overcome. 61.
So now is Lavanya Mataji and then Ankur Prabhu.
Thank you. Tani sarvani samyamya
Tani sarvani samyamya
yukta asita matparaha
yukta asita matparaha
vashehi asyendriyani
vasehi yasyendriyani
tasya prajna pratishtita.
tasya prajna pratishtita. Translation: one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha
ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः
sangasteshu pajayate
सङ्गस्तेषुपजायते
sangat sanjayate kamaha
सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः
kamat krodobhijayate.
कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते. Translation: while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises.
Thank you so much, Ankurji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
It seems that a lot of the people are now going for a second term. So
Okay.
is there anybody who hasn't gone that would like to go?
Yes, bro, I can go next.
Okay.
Krodad bhavati sammohaha
Krodhat bhavati sammoha
sammohat smriti vibramaha
sammohat smriti viprama
smritir dhramshat buddhinasho
smriti bhramshat buddhinasho
buddhinashat pranashyati.
buddhinashat pranashyati. Translation: from anger complete delusion arises, and from delusion bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. Thank you.
Thank you. So these two verses are nice. They give the dynamics on how it happens, and I can tell from personal experience how this can happen, where you can meditate on something, and then your mind just wanders all over, and then in a moment you have identified yourself with the object to such an extent that you have forgotten your position as Krishna, and you have fallen into the material whirlpools that kind of pull you around. And then it's a very fascinating dynamics to go through each step. I wish we had a lot of time, but maybe some other time. But that's how, in general, it happens. And then we can see how there are 5 senses, and each sense is pulling in different direction. In fact, mind is also considered one of the senses. In fact, the chief of the senses, the 6 senses. And Srimad Bhagavatam mentions that they are like 6 wives, which are pulling the man in various ways. So you can see how the jiva, small jiva, is trapped in this ocean of material existence with this powerful mind and senses dragging you every which way. And at this point, the Krishna's instructions that you have to control the mind, you have to withdraw the mind, withdraw the senses from the sense object like a tortoise does. Oh boy, it seems, I don't know, maybe it seems really, really challenging. Or maybe it's just me, but this is what it is. This is what we are up against. And Krishna is showing, hey, where you are. And then at this point, please note that he didn't even introduce himself, or he didn't even, in fact, in the next verse, next 6, in the one of the following verses, Krishna actually talks about mat or mine. So let's move on to next few verses, and then we can.
Okay.
Prabhuji, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Krishna did talk about himself in 61. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asit
Yeah, sorry.
matparaha.
Yes, matparaha. Thank you. Actually, I got confused with 67, but thank you for bringing that. He just talks about him once in the entire 72 verses that he mentions. He just talks about himself once. So thank you. Yes. Excellent, Guruji. Let's go ahead. Who's next?
So next is Vishal Prabhu, and then Leena Mataji, and then Brajvilasini Mataji.
Okay, thank you. Ragadvesha vimuktaistu Vishayan
indriyaischaran
Atmavashair vidheyatma
Atmavashyarvidhetatma
Prasadam adhigacchati.
But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord.
Thank you. So again, Krishna throws hints about himself. Prasadam means that there is mercy. Mercy means, if you talk of the word mercy, it has to involve 2 people, the person receiving the mercy and the person giving the mercy. So again, he indicates himself, but again, mat is not used. He's just very generic here at this moment. Prasadam adhigacchati, you will get it. Next verse, please. And then what happens if we get some prasadam? This is our verse that we use at ISV, where when we are honoring prasadam. Prasade sarva dukkhanam.
Prasade sarva dukkhanam.
Anirasyopajayate.
Anirasyopajayate.
Prasanna chetaso hyashu.
Prasanna chetaso hyashu.
Buddhi paryavatishtate.
Buddhi paryavatishtate. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. 66.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So nice to at least hear from you. Hope you're all doing well.
Yes, Prabhu. We are doing well. Hope you are all doing well.
Yes. Nasti buddhira yuktasya.
Nasti buddhira yuktasya.
Nacha yuktasya bhavana.
Nacha yuktasya bhavana.
Nacha bhavayata shantir.
Nacha bhavayata shantir.
Ashantasya kutah sukham.
Asantasya kutah sukham. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Thank you.
Thank you. So here we can see that no matter how much you have or how much you get, Krishna is saying you will not get peace unless you have this spiritual connection. You can try as much as you want, but it's impossible to get. So let's do the next few verses. Thank you.
So next will be Sukharupa Mataji, and then after that is Kalindi Mataji, and then Manas Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. Sukarupa Mataji, Haribao. Thank you for all your work during this time of COVID.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you.
Indriyanam hi charatam
Indriyana hi charatam
yanmano vidhiyate
yanmano niyuvidhate
tadasya harati prajnam
tadasya harati pragyan
vayurnavamivambhasi.
vayurnavam ivamvasi. Translation: as a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence.
Thank you. 60
Hare
years.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Tasmad yasya mahabaho
तस्मादस्य महाबाहो
nigrahitani sarvashah
निगृहीतानि सर्वसः
indriyanindriyartebhyas
इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियातेभ्यः
tasya prajna pratishtita.
तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. Therefore, O Almighty Armed, one has senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence.
Haribo, Mataji. Nice to see you. Hare Krishna. Check 69. Ya nisha sarva bhutanam
या निशा सर्वभूतानां
tasyam jagarti samyami
तस्यां जागर्ति संयमी
yasyam jagrati bhutani
यस्यां जागृति भूतानि
sanisha pashyato mune.
सा निशा पश्यतो मुने. Translation: what is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of um, awakening for all begins is night for the introspective sage.
So basically what Krishna is saying is that we should wake up at the middle of night when everybody is asleep, and we should sleep when everybody is awake. we'll here, the simple point here is, for those who are self-realized, the activities that enthuse or excite people who have no spiritual consciousness, the spiritually inquisitive sage does not participate in them, or finds it night means that there is no action on that, and vice versa. So that's what is mentioned here. Next couple of verses, 3 verses, and then we can.
So next is Priyanka Mataji from San Jose, and then Ashray Madhav.
Wonderful, thank you. Apuryamana achala pratishtam
Apurnayamam achala parishtatam
samudramapah pravishanti yadvad
samudratam apaha parivaisanti.
You can see the Sanskrit, Mataji, if you can scroll down. Yeah, is this better? Sanskrit?
Yeah, yes, Prabhu. Both is better.
Both is better? Okay, go ahead, Mataji.
Samudram apaha paravesanti yadvat.
Tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve.
Tadyavat kamayam parvas visanti sarve.
Sashanti mapnoti na kama kami.
Santim apnoti na kama kami. Translation: a person who is not disturbed by the intestine flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled, but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Vihaya kaman yasarvan.
Vihaya kamanya sarvan.
Mamscharati nispruhaha.
Pumanscharati nishpriha.
Nirmamo nirahankaraha.
Nirmamo nirahankaraha.
Sashanti madhigacchati.
Sashanti madhigacchati. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And who's last?
So ending off with Anand Kishore Prabhu.
Wonderful. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha.
Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha.
Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati.
Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati.
Sthitva Syamanta Kalepi.
Sitva Syamanta Kalepi.
Brahma Nirvanam Rachati.
Brahma Nirvanam Rishati. Translation: that is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God.
Well, I'll just do while we are. I'll just do the colonophone. Mataji, if you can pull up the purport for the last verse, and we can discuss just 1 minute, and then we can stop.
Sure, Prabhuji.
Om Tat Sadidi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. I don't remember the Yogo Nama Dvitiyo Dhyaya. I don't remember the second one. If somebody remembers. I'll look it up. So let's look up the second one. So here, if you can see, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Let's look up that. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita as being the contents for the whole text. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has been given as the contents for the complete text. So if you can go back, Ananda Kishore Prabhu, you can see how, it's everything is given here, but at the same time, some just a glimpse or in the seed form. Any questions?
We have 4 devotees who texted questions earlier.
Okay. Do you have the patience to continue to do the questions, or do you want to do it later? If everybody has a hard stop and has to leave, I don't want to hold the devotees back.
It's up to you on the devotees, Prabhu.
Okay, let's take the questions. I can answer in a summary fashion, and then we can if more elaboration is needed, we can do that.
Sure, Prabhu. So, Ishwari Radha Mataji, can you please ask your question? Okay. Mataji, are you there?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Sorry, I was looking for my question that I was asking.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, so I was wondering, how can we be conscious of our real duty while working in our, grihastha life? Because sometimes we forget, being pulled this way and that way, either by children or husband or something else. We forget that what we're doing is really to satisfy Krishna, but we get diverted,
Well, family life is such that things apparently seem to be completely unrelated to Krishna. But, and even though sometimes it might happen, just pull back and at least think, if I'm cooking, might as well think of Krishna. Right now, when you're child wants you to cook something and your focus is on satisfying the child, but pull back for a minute, Mate, and say, okay, even though the child wants it, but this I'm doing for Krishna. And unless Krishna eats it, my child will never find that happiness. So it's a steady process where the mind does get carried away, but trying the best to kind of pull it back and put Krishna in the center in a gradual way, Mataji. And I completely agree that it's not an easy thing to do, but at least in a start, that's a start. And then even amongst the Grihastha life, our sadhana should be strong. My 16 rounds is my 16 rounds, and my family is there, but it can wait. Only I believe that for the purpose of Krishna, there can be some detachment towards the family. Is that okay? Ishwari Radha Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uncle Prabhuji has 4 questions, it seems. Prabhuji, you can unmute yourself and please ask your questions.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So do the soldiers of both sides attain heavens in a religious war, Prabhu?
Yes. And then because they fought, yes, Prabhu, that's true.
Okay, thank you. In text 40, Neha Bikram and Nashosti, so there are 3 qualities described. There is no loss of whatever actions you begin. There is no diminution of pratyavayu. And Trayate Mahato Bhayad, it frees one from greatest danger. I was wondering which of these 3 qualities do not apply to Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga. I understand these 3 apply to Bhakti, but how or which one does not apply to other 2?
Here, I think jnana is not mentioned here. It's specifically to do with the karma yoga. And the trayate mahato bhayat portion might not be applied to karma yoga because I might be performing my activities and in the next life, I might still be not getting that kind of relief. But having said that, any work that I did in karma yoga, it will give me some relief, but not the same level as bhakti yoga. But trayate mahato bhayat is specifically referring to bhakti yoga. Is that okay, Ankurji? Or there are follow-up questions?
For Jnana Yoga, none of these apply?
So let me rephrase. The specific talk there was Nishkam Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, or Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Jnana Yoga was not even like kind of mentioned so much there, or the context is not there for Jnana.
I see. Makes sense, Prabhu.
Because later, the reason I mention is, in the 4th chapter, when Krishna talks of Jnana Yoga, he says all these sacrifices and all these, the path of activities that you do on karma, that will solidify or make your Jnana self-realized.
Yes.
So Bhakti Yoga is something that immediately gives Trayate, because the story of Ajamil is something that we can use where, he even did very little, but he was saved from the danger of going to hell.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Third question is Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhi, which means those who are Vyavasaya Atmika, their Buddhi. And it talks about it is one-pointed focused. So aren't the businessmen focused on money? Aren't the Jnana Yogis focused on Brahman alone? Aren't the Siddhas focused on attaining Siddhis? How is Bhakti unique in its single-pointed focus on Krishna?
Because all these paths can have dangers. For example, the money the businessman can get can change or get washed away. And so where is the focus now? And then the focus has to be something different. So is the case with Jnana Yoga, where we attain Brahman realization, but Srila Prabhupada writes again and again in his books, Yene Ravindaksha verse he is using to say that even if you attain the Brahman realization, you might fall down. So the goal of Brahman was not complete in itself. And you can, the third objection you raised was with what? I forget.
Siddhas.
Yeah, Siddhis. The Siddhis can actually divert the person from thinking that he or she is so powerful that I have the Siddhis, that I'm almost as godlike, and you forget the goal of life. And that's the reason why Vritrasura, in his prayers, he mentions Nana kaprishtam na chaparameshtyam na sarvabhaumam na rasadipatyam na yoga Siddhir Punar. So that particular words, you can say that I don't even want the Siddhis, because Siddhis have this deluding potency of making me so powerful that how many of these so-called Babajis and self-proclaimed gods, they can do a little bit of Siddhis and now they have become gods. You can see, Ankurji, how dangerous in fact they can be.
Okay, so neither the goal is fixed, or either the goal is not fixed, or goal is diverting the attention of the practitioner. So in that sense, it's not single pointed focus,
Correct.
right?
So it's not, it does not yield the complete satisfaction.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol, Srivasa Prabhu, this is Ashray Madhav.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. There is one interesting observation I made where Arjuna is asking, when Arjuna is really enamored by that personality, who doesn't get distracted, is always peaceful, and then Arjuna asks, how does he speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? And Krishna doesn't answer those at all. He actually takes him to the inner consciousness of that person, and maybe a little bit of the behavior, which you can appreciate only when you observe that person for quite a long time, because the person may not be disturbed for some time, but he may get disturbed later. So why, I mean, is Krishna trying to say that those things are not really important? You cannot judge anyone by that, basically?
Actually, there are inner meaning to Arjuna's question. For example, he asks, oh, how does he walk? Now, isn't that the question itself a little weird? Because how do you walk? I mean, how do you walk? Well, I walk on two legs. Well, how do you walk? I walk on two legs. So we all walk the same way, we've done the same thing. So the idea here is, when you say a walk, means like the walk is just a symptom of an action that is going to go somewhere. When you say I'm going to walk, means I'm going somewhere. Yes or yes, Ashray Madhav Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
So here that is answered by Yanisha Sarva Bhutana Yasyam Jagrati Samyamitasya. So in that sense, I do not walk towards sense gratification, I walk away. That is, so you can see the questions are a little deeper, and then Krishna is answering at a deeper level. Is that okay?
Okay.
Right? Otherwise, the question itself seems to be rather redundant and self-evident, where there is no need of answer.
Yeah, or I was thinking basically, like, you should not always, simply someone is wearing a saffron cloth, walking very in a steady fashion. You should not use those parameters, to judge someone. Like, someone can fake it. Someone can fake it, basically, right?
Oh, completely. In fact, if we can judge somebody on their outward appearances, then we didn't imbibe the first lesson, where we are not seeing the spiritual aspect, but just judging somebody based on the external aspect, which is subject to change anyway. So
right. Okay, thank you.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are 15 minutes over time. Please forgive me for that. Usually we try to do it. And thank you for being such a cooperative audience.
We have two more questions, Prabhu. One is Akash Prabhuji and Akash Prabhu, can you please unmute yourself?
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu. So my question was actually on verse 38, where Krishna is telling that you fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur sin. So somebody, let's say, if they extrapolate this and they say that, oh, I am doing something, let's say somebody murders somebody and say, oh, I'm just doing it for the sake of doing it, I'm not doing it for anything else, then would that person also not incur sin? So how do we know that like, if somebody is not attached to result of something, that person doesn't incur sin? So somebody can use that logic to do bad things and then say, oh, I'm not attached and I'm not, that's why I should not get sin. So how do we understand that?
Well, the same example I gave about a soldier killing on the battlefield versus killing, in a person. So there are certain guidelines or restrictions, even though how much ever the person might say that, he provoked me, or, he tried to attack me and I tried to kill him. But nevertheless, the act here is, it's based on my own sense of, I am the center of that particular killing, for example, murdering. How much ever you can say that it is not, unless of course there are some cases, let's not get that. But the self or the false ego in you was the cause of that. If not, then you are not liable for the reactions. Now, in the modern context, let's keep the judicial system aside, the mundane judicial system. From the higher spiritual perspective, when Krishna, when you are beyond false ego, let me look up that verse in the 18th chapter. So let's look up the verse. So the 18th chapter, the verse number is 17. It is 18. So it is mentioned, Yasya naham krito bhavo buddhir yasya na lipyate hatvapi saima lokan nahanti na nibadhyate. So here, if you can see, one who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by actions. So Krishna is setting a pretty tall order on who can actually kill without having reactions, Akashi. And we see that from a common 99.99% of the population is not yet there. So it's better to err on this side of caution rather than think that you can do without accountability. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Our last question for the day from Parth. You can unmute yourself, Parth, and ask your question. Parth, are you there?
Thank you, Mataji. Actually, I'm partly just wait for the other class.
All right. No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you for the class. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm deeply appreciative of all those who stayed till now. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha.
namo namah.
Hare Krishna. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.